Trouble, my longtime collaborator, friend. We've toured the world together quite a few times. A little bit of everything. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I remember when you first started your podcast, I was like very excited, but also just like, how are we going to pull it off when I'm a guest?
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
mean,
happy to be here.
that's why I waited off a little bit because I had so many conversations with people that were a little bit further away from me because I really kind of wanted to not just have it be me and my friends, even though I have a few of those kind of early on, like Lida's podcast was definitely that, where it was just
hmm
definitely turned into just a friendly conversation. But I think now that you're gonna be episode number 16, so I think we're starting to
Awesome.
get in. So yeah, can you tell everyone a little bit like where you're from and how you kind of got into this world? Because I think most people know of you through like being such a big part of the SF and then Oakland queer porn scenes that really pushed queer porn to be a global thing that it is now. But how did you get to that position?
I was a total like small town queer. So I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and was like, and then it was in the 90s. I was like high school in the 90s. So I was super into zines and stuff. And second I hit 18, I started doing phone sex because minimum wage was really shitty at the time. It still is. So phone sex
So
was really
like
good for me.
so what made you want to do phone sex? Like how did that even get on your radar?
Gosh, I guess I was just thought it was cool or like interesting. I'm gay. Like I really like women and femmes and masculine centered people. Oh, there's a bisexual part of me as well, but for the most
Mhm.
part, I'm like mostly into girls. So doing phone sex with a lot of male clients for me just felt like fun. And more of like a performance. It was really performative. And yeah, it was a really great way to make money from home. And like I said, like I grew up in high school, I was really interested in photography, writing, making zines,
Mhm.
music, underground. And, like I was part of like the underground queer scene in Olympia when I moved to Olympia. So, doing sex work, doing phone sex in particular was like this really great job that I could do while I was also doing other things like making art or like I taught myself how to build websites mostly because
Mhm.
I was sitting in front of a computer logged onto the phone sex line. Um, and also I was thinking about this the other day. I think Olympia might actually be the phone sex capital of the world because rent is really cheap there. And there's a couple phone sex houses there. It's an estate capital, so there's a lot of sex workers there. And I feel like I was surrounded by other phone sex operators in Olympia. It's just what we did. We like did phone sex
Interesting.
and had bands. We were all in bands
Do you
and
think
went
that's
to college.
is it still like that or was that just kind of the era?
Well, you and I have been to Olympia like twice since I've lived
Mhm.
there. And I feel like it's still like a really underground punk place with like a lot of kind of broke artists who are just like, fuck it, I'm going to do sex work. Also, it
Mm.
being the state capital, there's just a lot of full service sex work and escorting going on there that people don't even think about. It's such a small town. You'd think all the sex work was in Seattle or Portland, Oregon, but actually, like, we were just all just squished into Olympia.
Mm. So how did doing phone sex translate to doing porn? Like what happened? Like that caused the switch? Like was there porn you were seeing that influenced you that made it be visible as like is an accessible thing to do? Or what made you made the jump from doing phone sex to porn? Because obviously like it's a lot different than like talking on the phone because you're essentially anonymous is and then putting your entire self out there in one of the most vulnerable positions, you know.
Mm. I was definitely thinking like about how um yeah, porn is like a really hyper visible form of sex work. For phone sex you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of just sort of hide behind your ads or you're like your company and you're just a voice.
Definitely.
But like I said, I was gay and or homo or queer or dykey, and I was talking to a lot of guys. Like so, I kind of got this idea to just like start taking pictures of myself, like as like my own queer porn star persona. So like I came up with a name and just started taking pictures of myself, self portraits. And like I said, I taught myself a little bit of web design when I was a teenager, mostly like fan sites for bands that I liked,
Mm.
and like a website for my poetry, which is super nerdy. But I swear that's why like it was so easy for me to like build a website, is because that's what I was doing when I was a kid, just like holed up in my bedroom learning how to do HTML. So I really wanted to explore the other side of me, like that sexual side of me that was like queer and real, and like it was a little bit different than like my sex work persona, where I was just sort of catering to like the men who would call in.
Hmm.
So that was the initial, that was like the big spark, was like I want to do porn because in phone sex I'm playing this character that's kind of like this straight girl, and I would like to be like the queer femme that I am. And
Mm.
how is that possible? I definitely wanted to be like, this is sort of the era of alt porn. So like Y2K, like I started doing porn in like the year 2000, pretty much. At least
So like what
these,
was there like porn that was going on at the time that influenced you that you saw?
oh, definitely like the year 2000, 2001, 2002, like erotic BPM raver porn was coming out
Hmm.
of Seattle, Washington. Suicide Girls was coming out of Portland. I was really interested in those sites, but they sort of rejected me because I wasn't like their size, they're the right size, or like the right look, or whatever. So I just sort of like, that's why I was just like, oh, maybe I'll put together like a porn site of my own and just do some research and do how to do it, because like I would have, I loved alt porn. I think I mostly just wanted to be a part of alt porn.
Mm.
And like I saw myself in a world for that. And then I also like, there was actually some queer porn being made in Olympia that was pretty inspiring. My friend Devon Devine was making short films that he was shooting in like in alleyways, and like the only lighting they had was like these cars that they were using the headlights. So like there was also this website called spread.com
Hmm.
that was out in like 2001, that was like a bunch of queers. And also like my hero, Bruce LaBruce, like my favorite porn movie I can't even remember from that time was called The Revolution Is My Boyfriend, or
Hmm.
Raspberry Reich. And it changed my life because I definitely saw how you could have hardcore porn and political content like in the same piece. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of my work sometimes is like, hey, like, smash the patriarchy, or like, die cis scum. Like there's little elements of that in my work,
Hmm.
even though it can often be just, I don't know, pretty porno.
Hmm.
So yes, there's some political influences. I'm really glad Bruce LaBruce exists and that his movies came out, because he's a really big one for me. I'm also super inspired by Playboy and some of like the 80s and 90s porno mags. Like I saw a lot of Hustler when I was a kid. And of course, I feel like talking about my inspirations and my mentors would be really incomplete if I didn't mention Carol Queen, who had some books out when I turned 18 and 19 and started doing sex work. Specifically, her book, Exhibitionism for the Shy,
Mm.
which I feel really touches on how socially anxious people can actually thrive doing porn and sex work and phone sex and the performative types of sex work where you get to, I don't know, shed your inhibitions and be a sex kitten, or as I used to call myself and still do sometimes, a queer porn icon, which is totally tongue in cheek.
But
It
I
was
mean,
supposed to be.
but you are in the definitely like the 10 performers that, made this whole scene in like the Bay Area what it is. I feel like there's definitely a list of people that it's like you couldn't tell the story of queer porn without them. I think you're
Oh
definitely
my
one of those
gosh.
people.
Thank
So
you.
what made you move from Olympia to here to the Bay? Like what made that jump happen? Like was it specifically for a porn thing or what really made SF appealing?
Well, it was a really instinctual decision. I was living in a really cute house in Olympia, and the owner decided to kick everybody out so his granddaughter could move in. So I was losing my housing.
Hmm.
And I had graduated from college. I had graduated from Evergreen that year. And one of my best friends, Jerry Lee Manhattan, was moving to San Francisco. And we had planned some stuff we had planned like the Homo Go Go conference together with a bunch of people, with a bunch of friends. We're just, that's where we met. We went on tour together. So when he moved, I realized like a lot of people were moving to San Francisco from
Hmm.
Olympia. So the queer underground like music and art scene had actually sort of like shifted. Like Olympia was kind of the place where queer porn was being made. And then we kind of ran out of people, like everybody moved.
Was
So,
there like how much like recognition from outside of the area was the queer porn Olympia getting? Because I honestly don't know much about it at all, honestly.
oh, it was wild, Chelsea. So like in 2003, I went on tour with Nomi Lamb, who's like a huge influence on me. Look her up, look them up. They're like a Jewish amputee, badass, fat ass or sorry, pop star, sexual icon, like total goddess, like taught me so much. Like I learned so
Hmm.
much from Nomi Lamb. So she went on tour and she took a bunch of us, and I was like a burlesque dancer and like a backup dancer. And I took porn, I took NoFo with me. So I shot all the way around the country. We went all the way around the country, Chelsea. We went to New
Hmm.
York. We went to Arizona. We were in the South. Like we drove across Montana. Like we drove all the way around the country. And I took pictures everywhere. And I told people about NoFo everywhere. I told people about queer porn everywhere. So like by the time I got back to Olympia in 2003, like there were people all over the country who were on the website.
But
So
like
like right from the get-go.
was there any like mainstream press that picked it up? Like how mainstream press picked up what was going on in SF? Like how there was stuff
Um
like just kind of the whole like global or national recognition, or was it more just so localized
it
still because it was
was
a smaller market?
I wouldn't say it was a local market because it was online. Like, I was also making friends with uh, you know, the people behind That Strange Girl, Manic Jane, like some of the other alt porn websites that were
Hmm.
happening at that time. And so we were all over the country and sort of like all over the world. I was sort of meeting people. Me and Bella Vendetta met online in like
Hmm.
2002. So there's like always this sort of this network of underground porn happening. And I would really say that it stayed underground and it was like
Okay.
pretty like word of mouth.
So it was pretty
Um,
underground until the whole thing
mhm,
happened in SF that kind of
mhm,
exploded
mhm.
into everything.
For sure. Like the one thing that was happening, and one of the reasons why I moved to San Francisco, because I know you're trying to get that answer out of me, was Mills College invited me, just a little old, I was like
Hmm.
21, to come down and teach a workshop on DIY porn at Mills College, which is like an all girls college.
Yeah, it's in Oakland
So
Hills.
yeah, I took the
Yep.
train here and taught that workshop and came
Wait, you
back.
took the train from
Yeah.
that's like
I
a
love the train. I
holy
love the train.
shit.
Yeah,
That's
I've
like a
taken like
20-hour
three.
train ride for people who are
Yes.
not on the West Coast. That's so
Yeah.
wild.
Also, Chelsea, I really hope we can do a train ride someday. I think we should do
I'm
it.
sure we will again. I'm
Yeah, I
sure.
do. I love taking the train. That train ride was 24 hours. And like
Oh
on
my
my way
god.
home, I was totally writing down this whole list like in my journal about how we could move to San Francisco and like do nofo and like take pictures of people and like work at the Lusty Lady and like apply for On Our Backs magazine because like On Our Backs magazine was out of San Francisco. So like I knew some things. Like Lusty Lady was in San Francisco. On Our Backs magazine was in San
Hmm.
Francisco. Mills College was in San Francisco. And the Lexington Club was in San Francisco. So I was like, oh my God, I could be a gay porn star in San Francisco. I'll just go there. And like school was over,
Hmm.
everything in Olympia was kind of winding down, like right at that moment, like September 2005. So it was super impulsive. I moved down, and I got a job at On Our Backs the first day I moved to the Bay Area. And I didn't know anything about who was making porn here.
Hmm.
So this is just that other serendipitous moment of just being like, I don't know what's going to happen when I move to San Francisco. And it's like September 2005. And lo and behold, what happens in November 2005 is Shine puts out The Crash Pad, which is like sort of like known as like the first queer porn film. Like it came out on
Yeah, I think
DVD.
that's definitely the start of the modern queer porn movement, or I guess it's
Yeah,
not
like
modern
we
anymore,
really
but
needed a film. Like
yeah.
nobody had made a DVD. Like I was already sort of building this website up, and people were doing zines and people doing short films. And of course, On Our Backs magazine was like this wonderful queer print magazine with all this beautiful pornography in it. And like that's how I met Dylan Ryan, was through like photos of her in On Our Backs from the Crash Pad. So I mean, what a serendipitous moment to be like, oh, I think I'm going to move to San Francisco like at the end of this month. Cause like it's just a really good opportunity, and I want to work at the Lessie Lady, and I want to make queer porn. And then I move here and I get a job at On Our Backs, and I get to make queer porn.
I feel like that's how these like art scenes and stuff happens, that it's just a lot of people kind of all being like, oh, it's fairly affordable to move here. Oh, there's some people making some
Mm-hmm.
interesting stuff, and it just starts to build up. So when was it after Crash Pad built? Um, after they built their like first movie came out, how long until it actually started like actively clicking that it was going to be a cohesive scene, and there was energy in it and more people were coming in here to be involved with it? Because it sounds like, when did your first film come out? Because theirs came out in 2005, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I had been okay. So I'm a photographer, so mostly I was just doing this alt porn website thing. But sometime in like 2003, 2004, I bought this little digital camera, and it was the first digital camera that I had that you could shoot videos on.
It's just
Um,
so wild to think that back
it's
then
an
it was still
accident based on technology.
that like you either had a camera or you could do video, and it wasn't
Yeah.
like a back. That's so
No,
bizarre
you
just
really
thinking in
couldn't.
modern times, like, because
No,
you were just like,
Chelsea,
oh, I didn't
the
have anything to
first
shoot it
digital
on.
camera, like the first real digital camera that you could take really nice pictures on, the
Hmm.
one that I had, I got that in 1999 or 2001. Like, and that's like literally exactly when like sort of the alt porn movement started. So like there's this real argument growing that as soon as the technology is available, underground pornography or amateur pornography starts getting made, or artists will start making pornography with the new
Hmm.
technology. So that's what I mean. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to Bella Vendetta. That's what happened to
Yeah.
Joanna Angel. Joanna Angel actually started Burning Angel like the same year that I started NoFo. So if you kind of just like look at it, like it's that Y2K porn movement. And then that kind of died. And then it was like the 2005 to 2010 is kind of like that queer porn movement that like AVN or like Time Magazine called us the queer porn mafia for like a year.
Time
Um,
Magazine did.
Time Magazine called us the
That's
queer
fucking
porn mafia.
wild. I had no idea it got that high up,
I
but
know we
I
haven't
guess
even
it makes
gotten.
sense though. It truly does. I mean,
It
just
does.
that, yeah, like when I came here was so much later on when it was such a
Hmm.
developed scene, but even coming here, it was just like when you would walk into the armory, it felt like you're walking into like a fucking baseball stadium or something, with all like the flags
Fascinating.
up every day, and like you have the BDSM flag, you have the gay flag, like it just felt like it had that thing, and everyone would like look at you if you walked past that, and there was like tours going on in it. It just feels like porn was such a different place in SF when I first moved here, that was really just kind of an accepted part of the city, that there's porn stars who live here, and now it's just so different. And yeah,
Well,
so
what is interesting is if we go back even further, um, San Francisco and the Bay Area has always been a wonderful, interesting place for pornography. Like the Mitchell brothers
mhm,
shooting sort of in the golden era, in the 1970s.
yeah.
I guess I'm pretty inspired by that stuff too. I don't actually get nostalgic around porn around the 70s or 80s.
Mhm.
But I can see how that, like, the way that they were able to start shooting on, like, handheld cameras or 16
Mhm.
millimeter film, or even like Super 8 or whatever. Like some of that stuff is really fucking beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's a lot of the same energy that when Super 8 cameras came out and when digital stuff came out in the 2000s. It seems
Totally.
like they're kind of movements that kind of have a similar vibe to about artists seizing the means of production.
Absolutely.
So when all this shit was happening here, when stuff was starting to pick up, what was the moment that you knew this whole scene was something more than just, oh, Shine's making some stuff, I'm making some stuff? Like, what happened that you really realized the scale of it?
Um, I mean, I know we just talked about it, but I think it might have been that Time magazine moment. Was the first time that a group of us went to the AVN Awards and walked down the red carpet for the first time. So, historically, a few queer people have been able to walk down the red carpet, like one or two trans men, one or two dyke couples.
Mhm.
But for the most part, there had been more issues than non issues. People getting kicked off of the red carpet for like being in a same sex partnership or little things like that.
Mhm.
So that year, I don't know what year it was. Maybe it was 2009. Um, we went to the AVN Awards all together. So it's like me and April Flores, Carlos Batts, her husband, rest in peace, Shine Louise Houston, Jisley, and Dylan Ryan. And we're pretty tight knit at that time, and we're all walking together, and we get this picture taken together. Where like Dylan took a dick out on the red carpet, and Jiz like got down on their knees and like put Dylan's like fake dick in their mouth, and like me and April are just smiling because we're like so happy to be like fat queer people on the red carpet. And then Carlos Batts just looks amazing in his tuxedo. And yeah, there's a picture that Time magazine took. And I still have it. There's like the little icon in the corner and everything. It's
Wow.
wild. That was a wild moment. And I'm glad I paid someone to do my makeup, frankly, because I was nervous.
It's just so wild how it went from, I mean, even with that, it was the 1 year where it's like, okay, queer porn is here for now, but that it's still this ongoing thing where there's performers that, like myself, like I've been nominated like 8 years in a row now. And it's like, when I got here, that wasn't the plan with queer porn. It was,
No.
if you work really hard, maybe one year they'll be like, hey, you've been working really hard, we'll give you one. It's just
Well,
so
we get really
wild to
excited
think.
about things like altporn.net talking about us, or like a film festival asks for something, and like
Yeah.
those were really the things we're like, oh, this is really cool, or like a magazine wants to interview me about like the intersections of feminism and pornography, and I'm like more than happy to do that. Like those were really the things where I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And then there was the AVN nominations. When the AVN nominations started coming in, um, things felt really serious all of a sudden. Like, oh, queer porn is being put on the map in a way that I definitely think we're ready for.
Yeah, I think it's just so, it's really interesting because I understand where it was. And then I feel like when I came into it, I feel like as much as my career is about, I worked really hard. My work ethic is like unstoppable because I'm Midwestern and stuff. But like when I came into it, there was so much higher press than I think I would have ever imagined. Like when we shot with Bailey J, Cosmopolitan was there, you know?
Yeah.
Or like just like all these things are being like, oh yeah, I did a thing for Glamour magazine, or like Rolling Stone, or like all these things that I feel like when I started queer porn, that wasn't part of the thing. It wasn't this like kind of higher echelon press you're
Mm-hmm.
getting, doing red carpets, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when
Mm-hmm.
I got into it, I was very much like, oh yeah, everything's gonna be like shooting with Maxine. It's gonna be fucking gnarly. It's gonna be like doing all this crazy shit in public and like doing all this really raw stuff. But it's just so strange how this one little movement here with, you know, honestly a handful of people that started it, it became this
I think
global
San
movement.
Francisco, uh, yeah, has really nurtured its porn and sex worker community um, for decades. And so, yeah, when a bunch of us creative individuals came along with all this technology, mind you, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just think it was bound to happen. And also like with every good underground art movement, well, maybe not every good underground art movement, but underground art movements often get like gentrified or like picked up by the media. So, I mean, I've been through this before. Like when I was a kid, I was into Riot Girl. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was in the Riot Girl scene. Like I was a little baby, but one of the things that I noticed was like, you know, there was always like mainstream press about Riot Girls and like all of the, you know, like you would start to see grunge fashion on the runway, like
Mm-hmm.
Fashion Week. And you start to realize, oh, like people want a piece of this. Like there's something we're giving something, like we're serving something that people really need or what people really want. And of course, when, you know, like when corporations or when the media picks up that something is like wanted or needed or popular, it's gonna pick up on it right away.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, like, I when did you move to San Francisco? Because I definitely feel like the press interest in queer porn, well, not even the press interest in what they were calling feminist porn or ethical
Yeah,
porn
that was
was
the thing
really,
too.
really popular when you moved to the Bay.
It was. I moved in 2013, and it was. I mean, I was there for 3 months, and then they were like, "Okay, you're on the cover of East Bay Express." And it's like the fuck, like that's truly what happened. And there was just so much interest on at our movement that like they went to the Trouble Films, like where we were doing all of our meetings and stuff. Like that was just a normal day where it was like, okay, so we have meetings at this time, but then local press is gonna come and interview and do photography on everyone. It's just like such a
Why did
weird
I
thing to
do
think
that?
about. But
Sometimes now I'm thinking about it. I mean, it was all good. I guess like that's the conversation to have is like we definitely invited. I feel like yeah, there were some stakes moments where we were really willing to like let the outside world see what we were doing.
yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, sometimes it feels super overwhelming. Like I actually don't talk to every reporter who contacts me. um, but the East Bay Express thing was really cute because it was a local journalist and she brought like a photographer and like asked everybody a bunch of questions, and we had this little fake shoot, like it wasn't a real porn set.
I think we had a regular like Trouble Films meeting that day when we still had like six directors.
Yes,
Well, the first
we
time we
ran
had
a
six
studio.
directors. Yeah.
We have 6 directors now and no studio.
Yeah, it's really just wild how much Trouble Films has grown and really given artists a platform. And I think that's kind of the second chapter of your public arc.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like your first one
Mm-hmm.
is you were such a pivotal part to making the SF porn scene happen. You and Shine, I think, are definitely like, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna say in thrash metal terms, you're Metallica and Slayer. Like that's
I
how
want
it
to be
is
Slayer.
though. It is true though. Obviously, Trouble Films is though. Like we
Only
definitely
because it
are.
sounds like Slayer.
But like also just the stuff we do is like so we've like kind of stuck to our guns throughout all of this. Like we're shooting kind of the same content. We're shooting
I
fucked
would
up femme
definitely
stuff.
classify my porn as like continuously punk as fuck and
Mhm.
keep going. I feel like I started out super DIY. In the middle, we got some nice cameras and some nice lighting there. And like, like when Bailey J reached out, it was like, oh my God, are we making mainstream porn now? But then even that kind of had its little like indie rock, do it yourself kind of vibe to it. And like, I just, I never made enough money to really like fully solidify everything as like a big porn studio. Like we don't actually have like a location or DVD distribution. Like those kinds of things kind of like that was basically 2012 to 2015. And that was maybe like the biggest we ever got, like the busiest I would say we ever were. Um, and then I took a break and went to grad school, and then after grad school I feel like I got really into performing again.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, like directing is fun, and of course, I still shoot things all the time. I love taking pictures. I feel like, I'm not doing like the roulette series anymore. Like I haven't done a lesbian curves in a few years. Like I'm
Mhm.
not like active. I don't have like an active film line that I'm doing, but
But I mean,
I've
you are
been
part
really
of
loving performing. Like
but
I finally made a name for myself as a performer. So now I'm working, like I don't know. I've had a lot of great scenes. I was thinking about like Zarah Stardust down in Australia, like Angela White, like for Shape of Beauty. Like I've gotten to do some really cool things
I
as a
think you've always
performer.
been viewed on the outside as a performer filmmaker. I think
Yeah.
people view your work as much as your directing. I don't think it's
They
one or the
really go
other.
hand in hand for
Yeah.
me. Like, I feel like I don't want to. I mean, that I was like, I don't want to bring you any sound bites. I don't want to say anything I've ever said
Do it.
before. But one of the things I've said many times in interviews is like, I am like, I could not pick one. Like, well, maybe I could. Like, I could definitely be just a. I could just be a performer, but I probably wouldn't get enough work. And I also, like, as a photographer and an artist, and I think that those filmmaker directorial storytelling urges do come out. They totally go hand in hand. I definitely don't think I could be a porn director without actually like really having my skin in the game as a performer. I've always kind of known that about myself, is that like I don't actually, I know a lot of people do, but I don't actually understand how people can make porn without being in it, without having some skin in the game.
Yeah, I feel
There's
like
so
there
there's always a difference to me when a director has never been in porn. I'm like, oh, why not? Why haven't you been in porno? Like, why are we over here and you're over there? Let's switch the tables. So I'm always willing. Like, if I weren't willing to get in front of the camera, like I would just not make porn. That would be so weird to me.
I feel like all the directors who I have worked with who are I think there's a big difference. There's a lot of porn directors who are I feel like, just the authority figure on set, but I feel like there's also a second type of director that's really trying to facilitate a story and really doing that whole thing.
Yeah.
And the person I see it most from is Ricky Greenwood. I
I
think,
love his work.
yeah, I feel like being on set with him it's almost, it's different, but it almost reminds me of Four Chambers in a way, but with a different angle. Where Four
Mm-hmm.
Chambers is all about trying to create a very creative, like experimental space. I feel like he equally does that with his style of films. And I feel like it really comes across on set like that. That is a real true collaborative thing. And I think people like that, like directors like that, I think that's going to be the future of the industry. Because I think it's just going to be more and more performers wanting to own stuff and wanting more control. And I think
Definitely.
eventually all these studios are going to start losing so much money that they're not going to be having the big budgets. And so it's going to be performers trying to reach out to directors and filmmakers who they know they can work with and know that they both have the same end goal and the same vision. And I don't think there's very many people like that in this industry, truly.
Absolutely fascinating that you say that, because that's exactly how my scene for adult time happened. Was Angela White and I became friends in the past few years. We both have similar academic interests, actually, when we're thinking about porn literacy. So we really wanted to shoot together, and we were trying to figure out, if we just wanted to do it on our own, like together, if we were going to have Angela White on TROUBLEfilms, could you imagine? Like all these different opportunities. And then we were like, she reached out and asked Bree Mills if she would direct us. And then Bree Mills reached out to Whitney Wright and said, hey, will you produce this? And then they got back to us and we were like, we have this really good idea. It's all about your friendship. And so that's how I see porn happening a lot these days, is that like porn stars develop relationships with each other, be it through social media or the conventions or living in the same town or pen pals, whatever. And they reach out to directors that, exactly as you said, they reach out to directors they want to collaborate with. And then a week later, the director comes back with this beautiful script that completely suits everything you were looking for in a scene. And says, hey, do you want to do this? And like, what do you want your crew to look like? And what do you want for lunch? And like that, I mean, like working for Adult Time is like crazy privilege. Like that's like one of the biggest companies you could possibly get a job for in the adult industry right now. So like to actually see how it functions at that level right now, I can completely agree with you. Like I really think that the relationships between two performers is really like having an effect on how porn is cast and stories are told and directed. And I love making movies with you too. I mean, that's probably the people who are listening to this conversation probably know me best and you best for the movies we made together.
For sure. I also feel like,
as weird as they are.
Also, I just feel like with TROUBLEfilms as a whole, it's just so much now just about what performers are doing on their own time and making it on their own.
Right.
Like, that Sinn Sage has seen like a straight up renaissance in their career, that they've accomplished everything they could at studios. And then when we first started talking to Sinn, it was like, okay, so I have all these scenes. How can I make these movies? And then that's literally been the last like 3 years of Sinn just continuously putting out really great lesbian content. And that's now part of TROUBLEfilms. And it's even more that we can have other directors like Mistress
April Flores.
Yeah.
You're trying not to say her real name. Katie Kanako. Mistress Kanako.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's so interesting that we can do that now. Or even work with collectives like the Amsterdam Queer Porn Collective. Like, I just feel like there's so much more that's just performers with performers and literally having nothing to do with the studio. You don't have to call anyone to be like, can we get funding for this? It's like, no, we can make it on our own. We'll do it on our own. And that's like, I think the truly amazing thing about TROUBLEfilms. And because before, I feel like TROUBLEfilms had some growing pains because we were still, I feel like, operating on the old thing where it was like, okay, this is the set rate people need for scenes. Everyone's trying to raise money to have their own like films come out. And it felt like there was so much of that stuff going on when it was, 6-7 people at the company before. And then it was like you and I for a second. And then we've brought people in, and I feel like what we're doing with East Bay Brats is also a very good example of that, where it's like everyone's gets what they want. Our overhead is like nothing. I mean, truly, we went from spending about like 5 to 10K on a movie with like fucking Mystic. That was a lot of money.
That was a lot
now
of money.
With East Bay Brats, we're paying the rental fee essentially, and then just editing it ourselves. So it's like a few $100s split by 5 people.
Well, technically, from like if I guess I'm the CEO of Trouble Films. This is funny. If some CEO of Trouble
Yeah.
Films were to come out and say like where all the money goes, like everybody in the East Bay Brats is getting paid on
And getting
because
to own the
they're
content.
selling it. They own their content. They sell it themselves. And then the other thing that Trouble Films does is we pay them out because it's a collective. And like obviously, as you know, same with the filmmakers, we pay everybody out. And I think that just comes from like, I said earlier, like I don't think I could be a director without having performed so much. And I think like what I really see Trouble Films right now is kind of like this umbrella label that like treats the people who are like making films for it like as partial owners, even if it's like that's not like super possible. I just really believe that like we should all be sharing a little
Yeah,
bit
I mean, I
more.
think it just gives a platform for a lot of performers who just like truly
Yeah.
wouldn't have. There's just not very many companies doing what we're doing, I feel like. And I think that's a really unique thing.
Well,
And
I just
definitely
tried to
like
think
the whole
about like,
second.
as a performer, what would I want? Like what are like the bare necessities for me
Mhm.
and like what would be nice and like, after 20 years, I just continually think like it would be nice to own like a little piece of everything I made.
Mhm.
And it's not so bad like if I'll just talk about like my collaboration with Four Chambers back when they first started. I performed with Four Chambers, and that was a content trade because they didn't have the funding, and they don't do content trades anymore. Like they have the funding, um, and so you're able to make things possible with very little funding when you're collaborating with other
Mhm.
sex workers.
For sure. I also
Because
feel like it.
otherwise, we wouldn't have a job.
I also feel like it gets people more invested in their own career as opposed to just going there, shooting a scene, getting your $300 and leaving. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a really big thing that you're really investing in your own career and your own career trajectory moving forward. If you're gonna
Hmm.
become a huge international porn star that people are gonna know, you're gonna make the money off of your stuff as opposed to some
Yep.
site that has 600 other girls on it.
And I mean, it's not
So
so bad. Like, I think performers do really have a way to monetize all of their scenes. Like, I still make a little bit of money off of my Shape of Beauty scene just from affiliate stuff, you know? So it's like at a point in your career as a porn worker, you have to decide like whether or not like you're gonna have that website. I think that's like a big choice for everyone. Are you gonna do
mhm,
a site? Are you gonna have a paywall? Now it's as easy as like finding, like an OnlyFans or a Fansly or
mhm.
AVN Stars or something to put your own content up on and monetize it. But yeah, that's a huge part of what we do now.
So you've obviously performed in a lot of scenes over the last
They
over
keep popping
over
up in
over
my
a
mind,
decade.
like, oh, what scenes do I want to talk about?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, there was Nat Portnoy. Like there was
Is there
so
any
many
scenes
people.
that you wish you could do over? I have one.
Oh my, I wish people could see my face right now. I'm like in shock. I would like to do our scene from fucking Mystic over again.
Oh, that was like the worst. There were so
I
many
know.
difficulties during that scene. It
Oh my
was like one of the
God.
most stressful days on set.
And people love that scene, which I'm thankful for because I thought we were gonna have to throw it away. Like we had to put there was like lights in the mirrors and like there's like carpeting on the floor and the person who worked at Fantasy Makers was a totally mean lady
We
and
had a
like
light break. It like shattered.
and then like the stuff like some of the acts we were doing just like didn't match the timeline. Like it just
Yeah.
I would do that one over again because if I had you in a dungeon with like all of the equipment that we had and it was just the two of us and I really was playing that persona of like a housewife soccer mom slash kidnapper.
Hmm.
I think I would have totally done different things. I would have like tied you up in rope and like slapped you a bunch and like made you say, forced you to say you needed to stay, you wanted to stay or something. Like I would have been way more mean. And that's the one I would do over again.
There's always future East Bay Brat scenes, so there's always
Oh, exactly.
future opportunities.
Chelsea, would you like to go back into the dungeon with me?
Not that dungeon ever
Never.
again.
Well, that dungeon is gone, which is why I said the name.
Oh, yeah. It was like if your aunt, like great aunt, had a BDSM dungeon, but like didn't change any of the decoration.
There was literally like neon art from the 80s in the hallway. It was
like
terrifying.
Clown masks and stuff, and not even like a scary way, like just a decorative way.
Oh my god! And then she berated me because I didn't have a checkbook. I was like, "You don't."
I mean,
have
that was
PayPal?
that was a little
like,
bit real. That was a little bit real.
Okay, yes, I understand.
We didn't have the money, and we were like,
14.
We were like in the middle of the scene, and then we're like, "Oh, Courtney, do you have the money for it?" And you're like, "Oh no, I forgot it." So like that was the one thing that I think she had a reason to be upset about.
Right. It was definitely one of those moments where we're like, do we just need to pack up everything in the car and just like run away?
Yeah. I remember going to dinner after that.
I haven't had too many moments like that where I'm just like, why do I feel like we escaped like death somehow?
I remember going to dinner after that, and everyone was just, all three of us were quiet, just sitting there. It was just like, no.
No, never do that again.
The only
never shooting it again.
The only scene I really wish I could go back to was the scene with Bailey J, just because I was so new and I was so starstruck.
And that scene is so good and so popular. Oh my god. That's why you want to do it again, is because everybody on Earth
because it was like
it.
nominate. No, I think a lot of people have seen it and stuff, but like, I feel like of any scene I had, that was the closest to like getting to the next level of like maybe like winning some major awards, that I'm like, I wish I had a little bit more experience. It was the first time I was ever in New York. It was also Bailey J's first scene out of retirement.
True.
And it's just like, oh yeah, you're gonna work with like literally the most iconic trans woman ever to do porn. Here you go, Chelsea. And it was just like, oh my god, I can't. I was like starstruck just being in the same room as her.
I was also nervous and starstruck, but she walked into the hotel room and she was starstruck because she had just run into John Waters on the street. Because we were like in this fancy part of Manhattan, like outside of the Gramercy Park. So she had run into John Waters and she was like, oh my God, I just ran into John Waters. And you and I were just like, oh my God, we just ran into you.
Yeah, I mean, like everything about that was there like, okay, so she ran to John Waters. It was like first time in New York. And then it was like, okay, then so we're gonna quick do this scene. And then Cosmopolitan's coming over and we're doing an interview with them. And I'm like, I lived in, I think it was only like maybe 6 months prior, I was living on a college campus. So I'm like, it was a big shift in a short period of time for me.
Chelsea, I had literally never been reached out to by a journalist who wanted to talk about trans lesbian porn and feminism before.
Yeah, it was
a moment, okay?
It was a lot. So
like that came out of nowhere.
I feel like if I was maybe another year in the industry, I felt like I could do that better.
There was definitely a little bit of attention beforehand. Like we haven't talked about it much, but one of my favorite people to collaborate with and perform with has been Toby Hillmeyer. And also her friend Drew DeVoe, who I met in Toronto. So me and Drew DeVoe and Toby Hillmeyer were all at the Feminist Porn Awards one year. And Vice Canada was there, like Vice TV. And they interviewed us on television. And that same week, like the Canadian News was like in my hotel also interviewing people, which there's just been some really weird moments. Where I'm just like in a room with my friends and we're making porn, and then all of a sudden this guy from BBC is like in the corner taking notes, like we're like lab rats or something.
If it wasn't for the BBC, I would have never started this podcast. So
for real?
Oh yeah, I had the worst interview with them. Very bad.
Yeah.
So, but in a roundabout
Well,
way, this is
and
how this
that's why
happened.
it's so important that you're doing this podcast and that like you're contributing to like conversations that sex workers and like porn workers are like porn performers are having with each other. Cause yeah, when mainstream media, this has definitely been the lesson of this podcast is to be careful of mainstream media and just only do the things you want to do. Don't give them everything you've got, like you don't have to tell them your whole life story because sometimes they'll ask you some pretty intense questions about like your childhood or like stuff like that. So, if you're a new performer and you have like journalists and press reaching out to you about what you're doing, take stock and try to see it through their eyes. Like, what is it that you're attracting? Like, are you starting a movement? You should know.
Mhm.
Like, like what if journalists are attracted to you, like maybe something is happening. But also take care of your soul, like take care of your heart. I mean, you and I have both gotten super into like mindfulness and I think being kind of a spiritual person can really help when you're a performer and you want to be around for a long time. You really got to be able to like survive in between bookings or like create your own universe to survive in, because otherwise like it can just be one interview could really just like send you into a spiral if it goes bad, like or like sometimes a scene, like a bad scene doesn't go right and you could just be like, fuck this, I quit, like it's not worth it. And
Yeah.
like maybe you are right, maybe it's not worth it. Like you should always trust your gut. Like there have been times where I've quit. I 2015 I quit. I realized I was starting to get a little bit bored of watching people fuck. I was like, oh my God, if I see one more butt. And I was just like, Courtney, that's no way to be a queer pornographer. So I went on sabbatical. And I was just like, I don't think I should shoot porn again until like I can like see a butt and be like, ooh, it's a butt and like get excited,
Hmm.
which is definitely now like we're good. I'm healed. But sex worker burnout is a real thing. So
For sure.
sometimes you do just gotta take a break and just like find something else to do and not let those like bad shoots like the one we had for Fucking Miss It like get you down, because that movie turned out great and people love it. And it started a whole new movement. Like we talked about like the early
Yeah.
times, but my life has just been one movement after
Hmm.
another. And like you're a
Truly.
huge part of that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really lucky to have come here when I did, and I feel like in a way it's almost cheating in a way because I feel like I got the end of it and then I got all the press from it. So it feels a little strange like that. Like there's a band from my hometown. That's definitely the same thing where they weren't necessarily the best band, but they were here at the right moment and connected. So
Yep,
I feel
yep.
like
I
that's
I
how I
feel
feel.
like you and I are like exactly like that. Like we're not like the best band, like, but we're really connected.
Yeah.
And your friendship is really, really changed like my commitments to this company, to like the company Trouble Films.
Hmm.
Because I really love seeing what you make. And I really love like relinquishing, like the power and the privileges that kind of come along inherently with being a director, because I don't actually really like that power balance that much. I would rather just have porn people be porn people, I guess. All of us involved in the making and creating and the celebrating of the art or the product or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
So you've obviously you've won feminist porn awards, you've won an XBiz award, screened kind of all around the world. What's something that you still want to accomplish in your career that you haven't? Also, part of that, because the company hasn't won an AVN, what would that mean if that does happen? Would that be some sort of completion, or is it just kind of if it happens, it happens?
Well, first of all, if we won an AVN award, it would definitely be just the beginning all over again. Because then we would be starting our journey as an AVN award winning porn company. So that would be a beginning. It would be a jump start. Um, I hope that like when I retire, like maybe I'll get like some kind of lifetime award from somewhere. I don't know. But like I just try not to think about that because, you know, it's just an award. I'm an underground queer porn artist, and like that's how I live my life. And you and I have had conversations about like how cool it is that like AVN and XBiz have taken notice. But oh, man, at the end of the day, it's just like this nice extra thing.
Hmm.
But it would mean a lot. I think like the recognition, of an AVN award or even like another XBiz award would just give us sort of like the confidence to maybe like do something bigger. Because I mean, you've asked me like, what haven't I accomplished yet? Like, most of my films have been really small budget things, like
Hmm.
you know make it with whatever we have laying around. So a lot of the film ideas, like the directorial ideas that I have now, cost a lot of money.
Hmm.
Like I really want to make like a whole movie about like leather and femdoms and submissives, and I want like a whole cast and a storyline, and it takes place in this certain place that I'm not going to say in this podcast. That's going to cost a lot of money, frankly,
Hmm.
to shoot at. So I think making like another big budget film would be great. As a performer, as you know, I started out in alt porn. I started out doing modeling for photos.
Hmm.
For photos. I would love to be a lingerie model, but even more so, like I think Playboy would be just the ultimate gig.
Hmm.
Um, if they would just have me, because I love still photography. I love their aesthetic. I've been looking at Playboy since I was 6 years old. Like that shit like is like my formative
Hmm.
nature. I am gay because of Playboy. That was the first naked ladies that I saw. It's like a magazine. Even though it's online, it still
Yeah,
has
I'm
that
like,
like
I don't know if it's a
magazine.
magazine
No,
anymore,
no, I
but
know.
yeah.
It's all online, but it still has a magazine aesthetic with like the
Yeah.
merch, the bunny, and I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe Anna Fox could direct me or something. Like that would be like that. So if I could just like wake up tomorrow and my dream job came along, it would definitely be Holly from Playboy texting me and being like, "It's time, boo. Come be a Playboy bunny." That it feels real and not real at the same time, because I know the all of the limitations around Playboy. My age, my size, my tattoos, like there's so many things. So it's still just a pipe dream.
That's a good thing to have, though.
Also, if you and
That's,
I could go to Tokyo, that would be really fun. More of like an
I'm sh-
underground queer porn field trip to Tokyo would be great. So we could
I'm
see,
sure it's possible.
so we could
Yeah.
work with our crew there.
Yeah, I'm really excited to
Mm-hmm.
go back to Japan sometime soon. It was a really great
Mm-hmm.
experience there the first time. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so wild just not traveling at all after our lives were so on the road
I
and,
know.
just going from different country to different country.
I really have
So
loved traveling the world for this film
definitely.
festivals and stuff like that.
So the question I ask everyone at the end, if you could magically change one thing in porn that tomorrow is magically different, what would it be?
Free testing. It really
That's
is.
a good one.
I thought
Yeah.
about all of these things, and like I've told you before, I'm an avid listener of your podcast.
Someone
I've
said that. I
listened
don't remember who, but someone did.
I've listened to many episodes of your podcast, and like I think a lot of people are like talking about ways to switch up power. Like mainstream porn is really racist and fat phobic and transphobic, and like the people who sell it use slurs. And so I could say, let's get rid of slurs. Let's like get rid of the men. That sounds great. Like I could have all these like great magical ideas and poof. But like at the end of the day, porn is a medium. It's also like a way that a lot of people make money. So like if you strip away the awards, all the fancy shit,
Yeah.
AVN, the fame, notoriety, there's like thousands and thousands of people out there who are just doing porn to get by and to
Hmm.
make their rent money. I think you and I are actually two of those people at the end of the day. And the one thing we all need to do is to get tested.
Yeah.
So industry standard is to get tested, 14 days, have it that, have your test in the green for the 14 days,
Mhm.
shoot as much as you can, then you get tested again. I would love to see that testing be taken care of.
Yeah, I think that's such a
By
big issue.
whatever the government takes care. I don't care who takes care of it.
Yeah, it would be very nice if there was some sort of something with that, because I feel like we're seeing the issues with content trade and testing going on in Vegas right now, where there's reports of fake tests and all sorts of kind of messed up things happening that I
The
guess
tests are very expensive, like between $150 and $250, depending on where you get them. The COVID test is also has been added to it.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that's what I would do.
very good answer. Can you plug all your social media?
Totally. If I have a bunch of websites, so if you want to watch our porn, just go to TROUBLEfilms.com. If I could just plug that, because you can buy a membership and you'll get access to Queer Porn TV, you'll get access to NoFo, and you get access to my solo site, which is xxx.courtneytrouble.com. So if you want to go to that website, you can see where all the porn is. I'm on Twitter at Courtney Trouble. We also have the Trouble Films Twitter. And what else? I do premium feeds. So it might be OnlyFans, it might be something else. But if you go to troublefans.com, troublefans.com, it automatically will forward you to OnlyFans or Fansly or wherever I end up after. I think OnlyFans will probably be dead by the time this thing comes out. So.
Oh no, this is coming out literally in 2 hours. So you're
my God, that's right. It's coming out in 2 hours. Okay, so hi everybody. No, go follow me on OnlyFans, Courtney Trouble, or I'm just Courtney at AVN Stars.
Wow, you have that one.
I do. Yep. I'm also on Instagram, Courtney Trouble. It'd be cute to see people there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod, Courtney.
Your podcast is so wonderful, and thanks for having me as Sweet 16. And I'm glad we didn't tell too many secrets.